It's 8:07 on WMAL. This is Mornings on the Mall with Brian and Larry. I'm Larry O'Connor, and Amanda Carpenter, just recently of Senator Cruz's communications office, your communications director for Senator Cruz. Amanda Carpenter is sitting in for Brian Wilson. Good to have you.
Thank you.
So often this week, and you've been really great in lending your expertise from Capitol Hill on the investigation and aftermath of yesterday's attacks in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I appreciate you being here for that.
Tennessee is a volunteer state. We have a proud tradition of being linked to our military, and for us to see this happen in a city like Chattanooga is truly a nightmare.
Andy Burke, mayor of Chattanooga, yesterday talking in the aftermath of the horrible terrorist attack that we saw in Chattanooga. Joining us right now is Tennessee's own Representative Marsha Blackburn, Republican member of leadership on Capitol Hill. Thanks for joining us, Representative Blackburn.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Well, if you could give us maybe an update on how things are down in Chattanooga, how the community has responded, and what law enforcement and FBI are working on now in the aftermath of this attack.
I think the response of the community has just been shock. They are horrified that this could have happened in an average American city, in a community like Hickson in Chattanooga, and people are just shocked and stunned that someone would pull up to the Armed Services Recruiting Center and open fire. And, you know, we're beginning to hear from people who knew him, who went to high school with him. You mentioned the quote on the high school yearbook, and how that has raised questions with people that were in school with him.
Sorry.
But I do know that people in Chattanooga were a little bit surprised that just immediately the FBI took charge of the investigation, and they knew that it was something more than someone in the community being upset with someone else and a loss of life. And I tell you, my heart goes out to the families of those members of our military and the loss of that life.
Thank you for being here with us this morning. I think that's what's most striking about this. I think we're conditioned to think that something like this could happen in Washington, D.C. or New York or L.A., but the fact that it happened in a town in Tennessee is what's particularly saddening. So what are you hearing people say to each other? Are they saying we need to be more prepared? I understand it's complete shock, but what are you telling people in these conversations about what we may need to do going forward?
Yeah, Amanda, you know, there are a couple of things that are there. Number one, it points up the necessity for citizen participation and vigilance. We are all on this team when it comes to fighting radical Islamic extremists. And it means that everyone, if they see something, they need to report it. They need to be watchful. They need to be listening. We're finding out this morning that this young man worked with a company as a shift supervisor over in Franklin, Tennessee, which is there in my district. And so there will be more that is going to come up. We do understand that he didn't show up for his shift work on Sunday and Monday. And so I think that, number one, that citizen participation. Number two is we need to realize that with the advent of the Internet, that these are not lone wolf attacks, as some may say, that what they are. There is a network, if you will, whether it's sleeper cells or it is groups that can become activated. There is concern that this may have been activated by the tweet that mentioned the activity in Chattanooga specifically. And, you know, we don't need to jump ahead of the investigation. We need to allow the FBI to continue to do the good work that they have done. And it's been impressive that the intelligence community has done this work this quickly.
Representative Marsha Blackburn is our guest of Tennessee, and I have to ask you about the immigration element of this. This is indications are that this is a person who came with his family from Kuwait. And first of all, settled in the Chattanooga area. When people think of a a community that has a large Muslim population. They think of maybe Dearborn, Michigan, maybe Minneapolis, St. Paul. They don't think of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Is there a large Muslim population in your state?
There is not. Around the Nashville area, we have many of the Kurds who have settled there. They came with some of the churches, but I don't know the stats on the state's Muslim population as a whole. I don't know.
There is an aspect of this, since immigration has been in the news quite a bit lately, there is an aspect of this that many people are talking about with regard to the cultural integration of people who are coming and whether they're being screened properly and whether their backgrounds are being investigated enough. When a guest in our country does something this horrific, it's valid, is it not, Congresswoman, to start looking at those policies and questioning whether we're doing the right thing?
Well, there are some that have said we need to tighten up those ICE policies and know who enters and who exits, and be certain that people enter and exit when their visa says they should enter and exit. And I know that this is going to reignite that debate, and also watching where people travel. There was one report we got last night that the former wrestling coach had been told by the father that the young man had gone back home for a couple of years and then had returned. So I think that what you're going to see is a continued discussion with elected officials about the participation of ICE and how those immigration and migration policies should be reviewed and possible changes that should be made. It's an appropriate debate.
I really like how you're highlighting the need for citizen engagement in helping to confront what we're all up against right now. And it'd be my hope maybe in the coming weeks or days, the people in that community can kind of go out and talk to the media about how they're handling this problem, because other people in other communities need to hear it. But I think part of, reclaiming that united front and is having a frank discussion about Second Amendment rights and the need for citizens to be able to protect themselves. Do you think people will be talking about that?
And for that matter, the members of our military protecting themselves on the basis. Can we look at that policy?
Well, and I think the Joint Chiefs will probably begin to have a review and discussion about that. When we talk about radical Islamic extremists and their attacks on us, what do they go after? They go after those iconic symbols of our society. And they want to tear those down. They want to tear down our way of life and our quality of life. And when you talk about the recruiting centers, then I think that will reignite that discussion. I think it was interesting that this young man, that the shooter never stepped inside either of those recruitment centers, but chose to stay outside of them. So thereby he was not stepping on federal property, if you will. And we will probably never know if that played into a decision. But it is such a horrific crime, and I am so sad for the community of Chattanooga. And I think their initial response was just so tender and expressed their shock. And they showed up with flags at the scenes, U.S. flags.
Yeah.
And focused, Amanda, as you were saying, on the unity portion of this. And the governor and the mayor have both done a very good job of handling the situation. I understand that the local law enforcement has been very helpful to the agencies, federal agencies that are involved in the investigation, and I'm certain it's going to continue. Another thing that it highlights is the public domain on social media, and watching that, my understanding is they found this young man had started a blog.
Yes. And
was writing about his religion on that blog and making those posts. So the work of our intel community continues to grow every day, and we need to be certain that they have the tools and the resources they need to ferret out.
We've got to leave it there, Representative Marsha Blackburn. I really appreciate you being here with us today on, unfortunately, a sad occasion for the people of Tennessee. But please let everyone back in your home state know that our prayers here at WMAL and all in the Washington, D.C. area are with them. Representative Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. It's time for WMAL Traffic and Weather.